Hi, this is Dan McCoy from Rocket Tools, and I'm just going to tell you, everybody likes to be liked. And so right off the bat, if you like this video, please click the like button. But everybody likes to be liked. And this week I had the real opportunity to visit with Matt DeSano from HL Pro Tools, and he actually put this great quote and discussion on LinkedIn about being liked, and that likability was the very first step that's required to be able to build trust and to do a conversion and actually to do a sale. So you can't really expect people to purchase anything from you if they don't like you. So what are some things that you can do to actually get liked? There's a whole list on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put a link to the post because I think it's a great opportunity to review the standard things you need to do in business. But these are things like give great service, provide that kind of service that make people want to purchase from your business. So there are some things you can do in your business that can really help you get liked. And if you get liked, well, then you're probably going to sell more of the items that you sell in your store. You're going to sell more of your service. But today I don't really want to talk about that. I want to talk about how being liked can actually help you grow your list of contacts on LinkedIn. So how do you get liked on LinkedIn? A conversation earlier today with a client, and I went through this story with him, and I'm going to go through this story with you today, and I'm going to tell you how I think about growing your contact list on LinkedIn. And the example that I gave him was, it's like going to a party. So if you go to a party and you know that there's going to be someone there that you really want to sell to, somebody you want to connect with, it's a person that you know could be really help your business, and you think, okay, I'm going to gear up and I'm going to go to this party and I'm going to sell to this person at the party, but you don't know them. So how would you go about doing it? The first thing is you wouldn't charge into the party and stretch your hand out and go, hey, I want to sell you something. You wouldn't do that at a party. In fact, we know as our sort of personal EQ, that's not how we would approach that. In fact, what you would do is that if you approach growing your contact list on LinkedIn the same way, you wouldn't do the same thing on LinkedIn. You wouldn't go out on LinkedIn and just send out hundreds and hundreds of contact forms like, please contact me. I want to sell you something. Because that's how it looks on LinkedIn. People that send out these blanket contact forms and they don't do anything to make you be liked before you actually reach out to do a contact. It's no surprise that nobody ever responds to that. People see it on LinkedIn as spam. So what can you do? You approach it as if you were selling something at a party. You go to the party. And so first thing you do is you got to show up. You got to actually take time out of your day, and you got to go and decide, tonight I'm going to go to this party because there's an opportunity for me to actually sell something. Number two, you are present at the party, meaning that you make yourself known. You actually get out and you make people aware that you are there at the party. You get introduced. You start to network. Maybe the person that's throwing the party introduces you to someone else, but you make yourself known at the party. The third thing you do is that you start to have incidental contact with the group. You don't barge into a group and introduce yourself to this contact that you want to meet. In fact, you might just, if you notice, you just move yourself over a little closer. You start to join a larger group. You could join a group that's having a conversation and you get introduced. So all of a sudden there is a warm association with being connected with someone at the party. Finally, you might actually join a conversation. So you join the conversation and you start to contribute to the conversation. So there's a growth in the connectivity that's happening there. And then finally, after you've done all that, you reach your hand out and you say, hey, I'm Dan McCoy, and I've always wanted to meet you. And you have the opportunity to make contact with somebody at the party that maybe you really wanted to meet. And if you're lucky, and most of the time it happens, they're going to reach back out and say, this is who I am. And they're going to shake your hand. And then it doesn't always happen, but if there's enough of a relationship, enough of a conversation that happens at the party, maybe actually the next step is to say, hey, I sell blank, or I'm a part of this organization, or we're in the same field and I would love to connect with you. And then all of a sudden it's, hey, reach out and let's chat next week. So you don't actually, during this party time, you don't actually conduct business, but you use that likability to be able to grow the opportunity for you to make a sale, to make a connection, and ultimately to grow your business. So the question is, if you do the same thing on LinkedIn, you can accomplish the same sort of conversion. So as I told someone earlier today, the very first thing you need to do is you have to be present. So you actually have to show up on LinkedIn. And that doesn't mean register for a profile. It doesn't mean that you do those sorts of things. You actually have to build your profile. You need to go out and Google best profiles on LinkedIn, and you need to make your profile look good on LinkedIn. You need to make sure that your business contacts and associations are up to date. Yeah, you need to make sure that there's no misspellings. You need to have a hero image, that your profile picture is up to date, that it looks like that you are being present on LinkedIn, that you're legit. So very first thing is make sure that you look like somebody that could be likable. The second thing is that you need to go out and actually connect with people in the same sequence as if you were going to a party, which means you need to visit their profile. You possibly need to like a post. Maybe you actually comment on a post. Maybe you like another post. And you do that several times before you actually send a contact request and say, hey, contact with me. Because lots of times on LinkedIn, you'll notice that people liked your post and you'll go check them out. So maybe people check out your profile before you've ever had an opportunity to reach out your hand and say, I'd like to make contact. Before we go too far down the path, people are going to look and say, Dan, that sounds great. But the problem is that I really need to grow my business and this is very slow. And so when you start to think about how would I do this like en masse, and you're talking about spending these individual times to develop high quality connections. Two answers to that question. First, the answer is yes. I'm telling you to spend the time to make high quality connections, because high quality connections, just as we were talking about before, if they like you and they trust you, you're much more likely to sell and do a conversion. In fact, I'm going to be very adamant about this. No one is going to purchase from you if they don't like you and they don't trust you. So it is worth the effort to make that investment up front. The second is that you can automate it. And in fact, automating that kind of function on LinkedIn is relatively easy to do. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how that process would work in the context of how you would actually meet someone at a party and actually how you can grow your list on LinkedIn. So let me show you something on the screen. So if you were to, there are many different programs that are available today, but if you were to look at a particular program, this is a good example. This is a program that we have at Rocket Tools, but these programs are available in many different areas, but I'm going to show you this one here. So what we've done is we've created a contact on LinkedIn, and we've done a search, and we've created a list of people that we want to meet. You could do this on one-off, and so if there's just one person that you want to meet on LinkedIn, there's no reason to do an automation. You should go visit their profile several times. You should like some of their posts. You should comment on the post. And finally, after you've done that, you should reach out and try to make contact. But if you're trying to do it in mass so that there are lots of opportunities for you to connect with multiple people, it just is an efficient way to do it. So how do you do it? Go do a search, and we'll do a separate video on how to use Sales Navigator to find the right kind of group of people that you want. But find a search, create a contact list that you want to address, and then follow some sequence that looks something like this. And so we'll switch back over to my screen. So I've done a couple, and I picked one here, and we're gonna start from scratch. And so I'm gonna start from new. So I'm gonna enter a campaign name. We're gonna call this one test. And the campaign that we are using is something called a smart sequence. So what is a smart sequence? A smart sequence is a sequence of events that mimic the same example of the things I talked about going to a party, the showing up, the incidental contact, the being introduced, and then finally being part of the conversation, and then finally reaching your hand out to introduce yourself. It follows that same logical sequence. That's why it's called a smart sequence. Let's click on it and I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is an example of a smart sequence, a campaign that we have built into Rocket Tools. So we'll click smart sequence. And we're going to pick a list, and I'm going to pick something like I went to Tarleton State University. So I've done a little searcher called Tarleton CEOs in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that's really the example that I'm going to pick. So we'll click continue. And so we're faced with a couple of questions. So the first one is step 1. So just as if I had gone to the party, what would be the first thing that I would do? Maybe the very first thing that I would do would be to visit the profile. So this would be an example of going to the party and actually just showing up and being at the same kind of party where the person is I want to meet. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to visit their profile. Now, the second thing that I'm going to do is maybe I'm going to a post. So in this example would be, the analogy would be that I'm going to be a part of a group. Maybe I'm going to just slowly show up to where this person is standing at this party that I want to meet. I'm going to slowly show up and be just kind of part of that same sort of conversation. So we could like a post, and maybe we're going to do that in a couple days on LinkedIn. So very first thing we do is we visit their profile. Maybe a couple of days later, we actually like a post. The next step that we might want to think about doing is we might want to do it again. So we would actually like a second post. So we've done a couple things here. We've shown up at the party and we've gone and liked a couple of posts. And now on LinkedIn, if you are a contact that you're seeing it from the other end, you're going to see somebody who's checked you out. Now, all of a sudden, they've been a part of a couple of conversations. And so there's a chance that they may see that on their notifications and decide, hey, I'm going to go see who this person is. And maybe the next step that gets added is the next thing that you might actually do is you might actually follow them. So this time you're not just like showing up and liking a post, but now you're actually saying, you know what? I'm demonstrating on LinkedIn that I would actually like to get to know you. And I'm doing that because I'm following you. So I think you're likable. And since I think you're likable, I'm actually going to follow you to see what kind of information comes up from your page. And then after the follow, you could add another step. And maybe at this point, you decide to say, look, I'm going to reach my hand out and I'm going to invite myself to connect. And so you type some message, and I'm just going to do something really, really easy here, but maybe you could say something like, I might say their first name because that's always a good place to start. So we have an automation so we can actually pull up the first name. I have really enjoyed following your post, and say, my name is Dan McCoy, and can't type. I'm the CEO of Rocket Tools. And I would love to connect sometime and talk about whatever. Okay. And I would probably write a little bit more on that kind of post, but I think you can get the idea that we would write a first message that would be in effect generic, but we would actually make it personalized because we could actually put their first name. And you could add a couple of other custom fields in there, custom values, so that you could actually make it even appear to be a slightly bit more custom. So we add the step where at this point we've reached our hand out. So we reach our hand out and say, hey, we want to invite ourselves to connect. So at this point, a couple of things could happen, okay? The first thing is the person could not reach their hand back. Now, that is not very likely at a party because you're in front of someone and it's just socially awkward not to do that. But on LinkedIn, it can happen that people may not necessarily decide to initially connect with you. And if that happens, you've got a couple of options. One option is you could like a post again. So you could decide to like a post again. And so say, look, I'm not going to give up right out of the gate, but I'm going to post again. They could actually accept. And if they accept, you could actually put a follow-up message. And at this one, maybe we didn't put the connect up here, but maybe at this part, we say hey, I would like to connect message. Okay. And again, I would write out a detailed message here. I wouldn't necessarily write, hey, I would like to connect on a message. But the point being is you could do an introduction here. And if they actually accept it, your next message could say, I would like to connect message, which means I would like to find a time to visit with you about our products. And you could send that maybe in 5 days, or if you didn't want to act too urgent, you could send it maybe in 2 or 3 days, which is what I probably would do. So those are your two options. You could, if they're accepted, you could send this "Hey, I'd like to connect" message. If they didn't accept, then you could maybe like another post, and we could add another step. And the next step would be, if they accepted your message, maybe the next step is to actually endorse them. If they didn't accept your message, I'm going to recommend that you withdraw the invite. And in fact, just as if you were at a party and you reached your hand out, and maybe you even were nice even after they didn't reach back, and you stuck around and you still hung out, but they're still not being very friendly to you, then this is probably not the time and place to be able to make that connection. So rather than forcing yourself by continuing to hang out, my advice would be to move along and use another opportunity down the road, continue to warm up the lead, warm up the opportunity, and maybe take another stab at it, either at another party or maybe another time during the night. But regardless, you don't just stand around and hover, because we've all been at parties where people just hover, they're standing around, you don't really want to hang out with them. Maybe you want to visit with your friends, but the person becomes annoying. You don't want to do that on LinkedIn. And in fact, LinkedIn doesn't like you to be annoying on LinkedIn. So one of the things that I'm going to recommend doing is that you just withdraw the invite. You take it away. Couple of reasons here. If you have a lot of invitations that are hanging out on LinkedIn, you do run the risk that LinkedIn's going to devalue your profile, which means you're not going to show up as much on search, and they're going to see that as someone who's not working to be likable. So I'm going to encourage you to withdraw the invite. That's basically how you would do this sequence. And then, of course, when you're done, you would, in our sequence, you would do this so many times a day. We always recommend that you keep this number pretty low. You are limited on LinkedIn about the number of actions you can take. It depends a little bit on how big your following is, but I'm always telling people to start small. You can always raise this number up, but start like 20. You could actually increase it probably to 50 and not really have a problem, but you don't want to get your LinkedIn profile banned, and you don't want to overdo these kind of sequences. But the take-home message is that if you follow these kind of principles, where you approach growing your list on LinkedIn as if you were trying to make friends and contact with someone at a party, I can assure you that this builds the kind of quality leads that actually lead to conversions. It's not the kind of soft leads where people finally just say, sure, I'll like you. Sure, I'll connect with you. Yes, that makes your list look good, but it doesn't actually lead to conversions. You actually want to make sales. You want to make quality connections, and no one is going to purchase from you if they don't like you. And that applies to LinkedIn too. So this is Dan McCoy from Rocket Tools, and we love helping small businesses. We love to help people grow their leads and to grow their revenue and to improve their businesses. If you like this video and you like this content, please click the like button below. And also follow and give us comments about what we can do and what kind of information we can create for you to help you grow your small business.